Dr. Rona Fields, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
Let's jump right into the issue, which is this is not the first time that violence has erupted around the world over something that somebody has said or done. What drives people to do something that they know is going to lead to this kind of reaction?
The provoking of violence is the same process or the same dynamic that kids ages 10 to 12 have on a playground. The kid who thinks, I'm not so much of a much, I really don't have much status here, will try to provoke the biggest guy on the playground and get him into a fight in order to, he thinks, prove himself.
Get attention.
Oh, yeah. And maybe he can get other people to follow him, you know? So that kind of person usually hasn't developed his moral judgment beyond the age of 12, where it's, if I don't like you, I will do something to you. If your family did something to somebody in my family, I'll do something to you back. And it escalates. But with a child that age, hopefully there will be adults around who can say, now wait a minute, and take them aside and say, I know you're doing this because you really feel not important to the other people, but you are important to me, you are important to all of us.
But we have adults who are stuck at that level, is what you're suggesting.
Right.
Okay. So what is then the best reaction to an adult who's stuck at that level and does something like this?
Well, the best reaction is to make no reaction, to not pay attention to them, to know that they don't know whereof they speak, and maybe feel sorry for them a little bit because they're ignorant.
Are you saying that we treat them just the way we are told to treat a child who's having a tantrum? Leave them on the floor, don't look at them, don't pay attention?
Well, that's pretty much the way. You know, when the behavior, living in a democracy with a judicial system, one of the things we can do when somebody is being libelous, throwing lies around about a group or an individual, is we can take them to court and sue them for libel. There are a number of ways in different systems in the English-speaking world and in Europe to do this.
To do that.
And it's, if the person who is provoked has recourse to something to do about it other than violence, they need to know, and they need to take that action, and they need to see that it works.
Is that why we see different reaction amongst Muslims in US and Muslims living in Europe and Muslims living in Africa or Asia or some of the other Muslim countries that are erupting in violence that we see?
Well, one of the reasons is that in the United States and Latin America and European countries, there are legal systems against and through which, and political systems, through which you can express this kind of protest. You don't have to kill the culprit, but you can sue the hell out of them.
Right.
And you can put up your own arguments and put them before political leaders, before the media, and try to equalize the playing field.
So now you explained what's going on in the mind of a person who's provoking. Let's get to the mind of the person who's reacting. They're reacting in a geographically distant location, having nothing to do with that person burning either embassies, or I saw on the news a KFC, which is probably owned by a local. What is going through their mind? Why are they feeling that doing something to this building in their city will somehow will avenge what has happened in a distant city?
Well, there are several different mindsets. One of them is the martyrdom mindset, about which I wrote in this book, because this is really the individual who feels that he or she and their group are being victimized, and they have no access except to put their lives on the line.
And let me let people know who want to read it. It's called Martyrdom, The Psychology, Theology, and Politics of Self-Sacrifice, a book by Dr. Rona Fields. I'm sure it's available in multiple places.
It was published by Prager, and you can get it through Amazon.com.
Okay. So you're saying that they feel they have no recourse, their group, but, how should they react, or how can the reaction be managed?
Well, this is one of the, like I said, one of the ways that they do react is through jihad and martyrdom killing. And this is not a very satisfactory way, because you can't even live to see any satisfaction. You're dead. Dead is dead. And this is also, it doesn't help anything. Doesn't change anything.
So burning buildings in Egypt or Libya or Yemen and Afghanistan and Pakistan doesn't change anything?
It doesn't change anything, except that it puts you in worse shape than ever. Because what the people doing it usually are terribly economically disadvantaged. And what they don't realize is that the problems in their economy are going to be exacerbated and worsened because the rest of the world sees them as violent, sees this as a violent place, sees this as someplace they don't want to go. They won't get the tourists. They don't want to invest money in it because their structures will be broken. And it even discourages diplomatic relationships. So, but they don't realize it at the time. What they go into is a kind of mob mentality. And usually they get leadership from people who are still looking at themselves as the little guy on the playground who has to assert themselves to prove to the big guys that they're equal and superior. So they're being led by people who aren't leading, who are following the
from behind.
Yeah, from the spirit of the mob, and encouraging the mob, and getting leadership in front because the mob is pushing them forward.
The mob is pushing them forward. But here's a question that a lot of people ask: how much of a clash of values to do with it? The values in an American society versus the values in an Afghan society, a Pakistani society, an Egyptian society?
Right. The values are part of what, in many societies, has been incorporated from tribal law into family law and religious law. And very often, that incorporation is done through religious extremism, taking from the tribal law these kinds of penalties to the other for violating my space or my honor. And so others mistakenly think that's the religion. And unfortunately, many of the people involved in these kinds of activities are not highly literate. They're not going to be even reading and understanding Quran, reading and understanding Sharia. They're going to be people who believe what they're told it says. And it's very easy for somebody who's an ideologue or somebody who's a would-be dictator to tell people what isn't true and have them believe it and turn it into religion. I mean, we saw some of that in Europe, in a very civilized country, very far from tribal law, in Germany, when Hitler wanted to lead the mob. Masses of people were suffering economically, they had suffered defeat in a war, and their educational levels were not at what they had been because of all that had happened.
There were 2 wars.
And their self-confidence was down. And so, I mean, one of the first things that Hitler did was tell them that there are these people who are your natural enemies and they're going to destroy you, and they're not human beings, they're rats and insects, and we have to get them first. And
so he whipped up the mob and
burn the books, and destroy people who are different.
So here's a question: can we then have too much of a good thing? So in America, a lot of people believe in freedom of speech to the level that anybody can say anything. But if it's allowing bullies to provoke other people who are not that educated or economically disadvantaged, and creating the kind of violence, should then there be limitations?
I think that when we start limiting freedom of speech, we move closer and closer to a totalitarian society. I think we have an example right now of what was done in Russia when these women wanted to make their case in a church, and have wound up getting prison sentences of several years each. That doesn't promote free speech, and it also doesn't promote appropriate public behavior or respect for the institutions of the society. It just makes the society itself look like it's afraid, and these big masculine leaders are threatened by these 3 women who sing.
Right. So basically, what you're suggesting is educating people, and the leaders taking leadership role is the best way to move forward.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Fields, for a very insightful interview, and thank you for coming to VOA.
Thank you very much for asking me. In order to, he thinks, prove himself.
Get attention.
Oh, yeah. And maybe he can get other people to follow him, you know? So that kind of person usually hasn't a
thing that they know is going to lead to this kind of reaction.
The provoking of violence is the same process, or the same dynamic that kids ages 10 to 12 have on a playground.
Dr. Rona Fields, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
Let's jump right into the issue, which is this is not the first time that violence has erupted around the world over something that somebody has said or done. What drives people to do something?
The kid who thinks, I'm not so much of a much, I'm a really, I really don't have much status here, will try to provoke the biggest guy on the playground and get him into a fight. Developed his moral judgment beyond the age of 12, where it's, if I don't like you, I will do something to you. If your family did something to somebody in my family, I'll do something.